Call the honourable member Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I am pleased to rise at this stage of the Dairy Industry Restructuring Amendment Bill on behalf of New Zealand First. Pleased, but I have to say also a little glum, because we have come to what is apparently the obvious end of this process, the culmination of which will be its passing into law. And I have reservations about this, as I know many others do, Mr Speaker, and in spite of what the Minister said earlier about the Labour Party caucus not being united behind their spokesman, Mr O'Connor, I am aware that there is some contention still within the National Party's caucus on this bill, because there are things about it which are not good, and there are things about which I believe many in the dairy industry themselves have reservations. But the bill will be passed, and we will all have to live with that and with those possible consequences. Essentially, Mr Speaker, this bill does not need to be passed in order to achieve the aims which it claims it intends to achieve. We are told that the bill will enable the TAF scheme, the Trading Among Farmers scheme, which has perhaps been the most contentious issue. It will also instigate price-setting monitoring regime and give us an alternative to the TAF scheme should the TAF scheme not be taken up by Fonterra, or should it not work, and that will be the share value fixing mechanism. But TAF is not, as we have discussed in this debate earlier, is not what farmers voted on originally. TAF, as it was originally mooted, was trading amongst farmers, and TAF has morphed into trading including farmers. And as has been mentioned by myself and by others in this debate, in other sections of this debate earlier, if the trading scheme requires external capital, then it cannot be, by definition, trading among farmers, and it is quite possibly not the right model for Fonterra to be following. The numbers that are worked around what TAF needs to achieve is that it needs to provide a shareholder pool of around 8%. That would require, because of the limitations on the number of individual dry shares which each farmer shareholder can own, that being limited to 5% of the total, it will require something like 25% of all farmers to give up 20% of all their holdings, and that's unlikely to happen, which means that we will need outside investors. So TAF is not trading among farmers. The process by which the system has been examined was rushed. The period for submissions was truncated from something like 6 months to something like 4 weeks, about 3 weeks of which Parliament was in recess for. And comments have been made that this was perhaps done to suit the agenda of a government which perhaps wondered or even knew that there was quite a lot of opposition to the bill amongst the industry which it concerned. The Select Committee, which I was privileged to be an observer on, a fly on the wall, you might say, and a fly who was doubly privileged to be allowed to make buzzing noises every now and then. I'm grateful to the committee for that ability to make input. The Select Committee certainly did not have as much time as any of them would have liked in order to consider all the submissions and to consider all the possible ramifications of the bill. The Minister claims that the vote taken by Fonterra's farmer shareholders gives Fonterra a mandate. Others have mentioned the numbers involved, that it was in fact, we don't know in fact that it was a majority of shareholders. We know it was a majority of shares. That process is a democratic one that has been passed, and we can question the ins and outs and the ethics of it as much as we like. The fact remains that we have a mandate on paper. Whether or not we believe it's a mandate in truth is something that history will come to record. The flip side to TAF, whether it goes ahead or not, is the share price setting regime. But examinations into both the milk price and the share price by the Commerce Commission and by others have all come to the conclusion that both the share price and the milk price are reasonably fair anyway. So these are not necessarily things which need to be examined, and not something for which we need this bill to be passed. We're told also that one of the purposes for TAF is that it will strengthen the capital markets of New Zealand. And I wonder why, as I've wondered through this process, how this will be of benefit to Fonterra or to the New Zealand dairy industry. And it will not, because beyond the initial bonus share issue, the dry share issue, the trading scheme will not benefit Fonterra at all. It will in fact only benefit the traders. Fonterra will gain a pool of capital from selling dry shares, and after that it can really wash its hands of what happens with trading for those shares. But it can't, because as those shares are traded, they will increase in value. They have to increase in value. There is no point in trading shares unless they increase in value. And as those dry shares increase in value, as the units attached to them increase in value, so the wet shares will increase in value also. And this will give the lie to the fact that, to the stated intention of the bill and of, indeed, dairy itself, to enable free entry and exit to the cooperative. Because although free entry and exit will be there on paper, it will be limited by the cost of the shares. So the share value increasing will affect not only the ability of farmers to enter and exit the co-op, but it will actually create redemption risk where redemption risk does not seriously exist at the moment. Sure, redemption risk is a factor that we need to take into consideration, and we have seen redemption. But as has been stated numerous times through this debate, it is not as big a bogeyman as it's been made out to be. So, given that the stated reason, or reasons for TAF, is that it will assist Fonterra to alleviate redemption risk or provide it with a capital pool for growing its brands business, this bill is not necessary. There are other mechanisms by which these ends can be met. Redemption has been overstated, as I've said, but it can be alleviated by changing the period over which share values are paid out to farmers leaving the co-op from 30 days as it currently stands to 3 years. And this does not need a legislative change. Fonterra can do that now if it wishes, without needing the law to be altered. Alternatively, the retention of 30 cents a kilo, we are told, over 3 years would raise $1 billion for Fonterra. And since all Fonterra's wealth comes ultimately from milk, any means of raising capital will come from retention or reduction of profits anyway. For this to happen, this bill is not necessary. Fonterra can do this now without needing the law changed. Alternatively, again, part of Fonterra's offshore business could be separated, could be corporatised, and could be floated on world markets, with the profits being retained by the cooperative. Mr. Speaker, these offshore businesses are largely joint ventures anyway, and have the potential to grow to the point where they could actually swamp the parent company. There is a case that can be made for separating and floating off Fonterra's offshore businesses, and for Fonterra to retain control and ownership of its New Zealand operations and of its brands businesses. This is a mechanism by which Fonterra's need for an additional capital pool could be met without passing this bill. We disagree fundamentally in New Zealand First that the milk market needs to be contestable. This is because there is a clash of philosophies here. Either you have a virtual monopoly or you don't. Beg your pardon, Mr. Speaker. Either there is a virtual monopoly or there is not. And Fonterra exists as a creature of statute that was created because the dairy industry came to Parliament and said, we wish to merge and we wish to become something which is larger than is allowed under commerce and fair trading rules. And Parliament looked at the model that Fonterra would become if it were allowed to be created and said, yes, we can see that this will be of value to New Zealand Inc. as a whole, because this thing is going to be large, it's going to be powerful, and it's going to benefit everybody. So it was allowed to exist. To attempt to introduce the concept of contestability at the same time as a virtual monopoly is a clash of ideologies. It's attempting to have one's cake and to eat it as well. And we do not believe that it is a desirable thing, let alone a necessary thing. My erstwhile colleague from the Greens referred to this process as the privatisation of Fonterra, and I confess it's a term I've used myself. I must clarify that we are all fully aware that Fonterra is entirely private. It is a collection of private businesses, of private farmers, of people who get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go and do the dirty work, so the rest of us can enjoy the benefits of the foreign exchange that their industry earns. So it's about corporatisation rather than privatisation. Though I agree with Mr. Browning's sentiments, I must clarify the terminology around that. But the purpose of a co-op is to maximise the returns to its shareholders. And if either the share values or the dividends are maximised instead of the returns to the farm, instead of the milk price, there is no way that the farm gate milk price can return those maximum profits to its farmer shareholders. Because, as I said earlier, all the money comes from one bucket of milk. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I wish to restate what the departing CEO of Fonterra, Andrew Ferrier, said in September 2011, that Fonterra does not need outside capital. Indeed, it does not. And it doesn't need this bill either. New Zealand First does not support this bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
I call the honourable member